In Myanmar, nearly 500,000 people have been fleeing to neighboring Bangladesh in what the UN has warned could be the result of ethnic cleansing. Why is the de facto leader Aung San Suu Kyi facing such mounting international criticism? And with Russia and Belarus holding military exercises at the same time that Sweden and its NATO partners also holding their largest exercises in 2 decades, are current tensions between Russia and NATO likely to be exacerbated? Welcome to The Point. Live from Beijing, I'm Li Xin. The latest violence in Myanmar's southwestern Rakhine state began on August 25th when Rohingya insurgents attacked dozens of police posts and an army base. The ensuing clashes and a military counter-offensive have killed at least 400 people and triggered an exodus of villagers to neighboring Bangladesh. More than 400,000 Muslim minority Rohingya have fled since then. The UN has warned the offensive could amount to ethnic cleansing. What sparked the violence in Rakhine, and why is Myanmar's de facto leader Aung San Suu Kyi facing mounting international criticism? What can be done to help the situation? I'm joined from Chicago, US by Dr. Azim Ibrahim, a senior fellow at the Center for Global Policy, and in Beijing by Xu Qingduo, a current affairs commentator. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Dr. Ibrahim, let me come to you first. What do you think? Explain to us the origin of the Rohingya issue.
Well, the Rohingya have been described by the United Nations as the most persecuted minority in the world. Over the last half-century, they have faced wave after wave of violence from the Myanmar authorities. But this most recent wave is probably the worst that we have seen. The origin of this persecution goes back to the Second World War, when the Japanese invaded what was at that time British Burma. The Rohingya minority remained loyal to the British colonial masters, whereas the majority Buddhist population decided to side with the Japanese, believing that this would lead to swifter independence. So when the country did become independent, there was bad blood between the two people. And this was followed by a military coup in 1962 by General Ne Win, who then tried to implement a economic manifesto, which was a disaster. And he did essentially what a lot of military dictators do, is that he tried to find a scapegoat for his poor policies. And the Rohingya minority, who looked different, had different features, different skin colour and different religion, were the minority of persecution for this blame. And over a number of years, there have been a series of laws were passed, including the 1982 Citizenship Act, which stripped them of their citizenship and their nationality, and they have been persecuted ever since.
Now, Xu Qingduo, the UN has called the army fight back a so-called textbook example of ethnic cleansing, with villages set ablaze to drive Rohingya people out. The Myanmar military and government say they are not targeting civilians, but rather a group of terrorists called the Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army, or ARSA, that claim to protect the Rohingya, but are in fact militants bent on creating an Islamic state in Rakhine. Is the ARSA helping or hurting the Arakanis?
Well, if you look at what happened recently, it is exactly the ARSA attack against the army and against the police posts, which killed about 12 people. That started the latest round of, say, offensive and strong response from the government. And of course, the situation in Myanmar is like, there's almost absolute majority view of dislike against the Rohingya people. Unfortunately, that is the reality, I think, not completely understood by the international community. So that's why there's a lot of criticism, not only against the government, but also against Aung San Suu Kyi. People are hoping like she, as these human rights activists, would speak out and would do something, would issue an order, and then everything will become fine. I think this is a little bit of a wishful thinking, let's say.
Dr. Ibrahim, now, what is your take of the latest round of violence? Now, Myanmar government officials have blamed the Rohingya militants for the burning of homes and civilian deaths, but rights monitors and Rohingya fleeing to neighboring countries say the Myanmar army is trying to force them out with a campaign of arson and killings. What is happening according to you?
Well, we have to remember that when Aung San Suu Kyi came to power, she set up a commission to examine the civil wars in the country, and almost every ethnic group was at war with the state, the Kachin, the Shan and the Chin, and the only group that wasn't included was the Rohingya, because they were a non-violent, non-militant group. They were seen as a peaceful people. The most recent attacks by the Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army on the 25th of August, this is a little known entity with very little resources, but the Myanmar military has responded overwhelmingly with completely disproportionate force, ethnically cleansing 409,000 people so far, burning their villages, as we have seen from the satellite imagery, and we now see that they are mining the border as well to make sure none of these refugees return. General Min Aung Hlaing, the Chief of Staff of the Myanmar military, is actually on record just last week saying that the removal of these illegal Bengalis is unfinished business from 1942. So it's very clear that they have simply used this attack as a pretext and as a trigger to implement a policy which they have long desired.
Well, I think these facts would definitely, if committed, would definitely have to be investigated, and justice be brought to all those who committed these acts of killing and arson. Now, let's take a look at Aung San Suu Kyi's attitude. Ching Duo, she's a Nobel Prize laureate who spent many years under house arrest, and now she's facing growing international criticism over the way how she has been reacting to the issue. Now, a lot of people in the Western media are even calling for Aung San Suu Kyi to be stripped of her accolade, of her prize, accusing her of doing virtually nothing to stop the cries against humanity, quote unquote. Also, at home, some people are protesting that she is not being tough enough in treating the Rohingyas. Why has Aung San Suu Kyi not denounced the violence as she had been expected to?
Well, I think, as the de facto leader of the nation, your role is supposed to be different as a human rights activist or as a Nobel Peace Prize winner here. And she, I think, has been quite realistic in running this nation since, let's say, over the past year and a half since her party and herself came to power. And as we said, Rohingya people, like it or not, that fact is, the reality is, a lot of people, the military, the ruling party, and Aung San Suu Kyi, and also the majority of the people, they dislike Rohingya people. And in 1982, according to the law at that year, Rohingya people are basically illegal immigrants from Bangladesh. They don't have citizenship. So I think Aung San Suu Kyi is being realistic. If she say, let's step out of the line to say something, to criticize the government, to criticize the people, let's say, or the nationalist Buddhists, and I think she would put herself and her party at a vulnerable position, and it's very hard for her to continue the rule. As we said, she is already under pressure, not only from, say, the international community, but also her own people. They say, you are not being tough enough with the Rohingya people. So ultimately, it's a very delicate situation. She has to be very careful in treating the land. And I even have suspicion like she herself, I think, do share the view of the government, of the majority view of the people.
Dr. Ibrahim, Aung San Suu Kyi took office last year as Myanmar's first civilian leader after some 50 years of junta rule. She has since focused her energy on the delicate political balance between her civilian government and the generals who still hold many of the levels of power in the country. Let's take a listen to what she said just days ago about the situation.
This is one of the biggest challenges that we've had to face, because you know that the situation in the Rakhine has been difficult for many decades, and I think it's a little unreasonable to expect us to resolve everything in 18 months. We have already started putting together an implementation team. We try our best, and we want to make sure that everyone is entitled to the protection of the law.
Dr. Ibrahim, what do you think of what she said, and what are the challenges she's faced with in trying to resolve this issue? Well,
Aung San Suu Kyi has essentially evolved from a peace campaigner into a full-time politician. She has now simply made a political calculation that the Rohingya issue is not worth utilising any political capital over. It is not worth antagonising the military and the extreme Buddhist clergy for this minority group who are not popular at all. And I would just like to make another point. This idea that they are illegal immigrants from Bangladesh does not stand up to historical scrutiny. One of the things I did in my book when I examined the issue of the Rohingya is to actually try to ascertain where they actually came from. There are documents that date back from the time when British ruled Burma that clearly indicate that the Rohingya are an indigenous people to the Rakhine district. Some historians say that they go back 8 centuries. So this idea that they're illegal immigrants is a narrative that has gained a lot of attention, but it simply does not stand up to historical scrutiny. And finally, I'd like to say that it is true that Aung San Suu Kyi does not necessarily have a lot of influence over the military, but she is the de facto leader of the country, the leader of the largest political party in the country. She's the moral conscience of that country, and she's a Nobel laureate. And for her to say that both sides are equally to blame for the violence, or there's no ethnic cleansing going on, this is fake news and this is all just a mountain of misinformation, I believe a lot of our supporters will be hugely disappointed. People like myself who supported her for the last few decades will be hugely disappointed and will see this as moral bankruptcy.
Well, do you think this is going to help the situation if she started to condemn the situation and break away with, or come into confrontation with the military rulers who, over whom she might not have any control or influence anyways, and jeopardize the very fragile unity that the country is experiencing since a very short period of time, Dr. Ibrahim?
Well, at the moment she is providing cover for all the military's actions. We have seen, almost 500,000 people ethnically cleansed on a massive scale. Even the UN Secretary General said there is no better word to describe this than ethnic cleansing. And we have seen war crimes going on within Rakhine district itself. And at the moment she is providing cover for the military and its actions. She's become a lightning rod for criticism. I think somebody in our position, the least you can do in a situation like that is to speak out and say that you do not endorse these kind of actions and you condemn this kind of action.
Yeah.
But she has simply not done that. Instead, she has said both sides are equally to blame, which is just not acceptable.
Mr. Xu, what is your take on this issue?
Can I jump in, if I may?
1 minute, please.
Like a very senior official from this, National League for Democracy, the ruling party, and Aung San Suu Kyi, he said that this is on this issue that unites the military, his party, and Aung San Suu Kyi and the people, and they are united on this one. This is about their national sovereignty and the national integrity. So I don't see there's any further room for her basically to move around there.
Okay, we have to leave it there. It's a very important discussion. I'm sure we'll be keeping a close watch on the situation. Many thanks to Dr. Azim Ibrahim, a senior fellow at the Center for Global Policy, and here in Beijing, Xu Qingduo, current affairs commentator. I would like to use an example which might sound a bit far-fetched here, but I think it's a little bit similar to the situation Aung San Suu Kyi finds herself in. When former US President Bill Clinton was wrapped in the sex scandal with Monica Lewinsky, many feminists criticized Hillary Clinton for not divorcing her husband. These feminists believe that by staying with a disloyal husband, she made the wrong decision and was letting down other women who should be standing up for their rights and dignity. But Hillary didn't. She had her reasons. As for a family, there are many more things to consider than just loyalty to a partner. For Aung San Suu Kyi, she could stand out immediately to denounce the violence committed by the military, but to help hold the volatile country together is a bigger challenge for her, and a decades-old conflict is unlikely to be resolved anyway in a matter of days, weeks, or even months. You have been watching The Point with me, Liu Xin. We'll be back right after this short break.
CGTN shows you more, providing a fresh global voice you can trust.
And a different look at the world you won't find anywhere else.
We offer unparalleled coverage of Asia, Africa and Latin America.
We present diverse perspectives on news and newsmakers from around the world.
We want to engage our viewers with stories that represent the complete picture.
We want to share with you ideas that matter to us all.
The stories, the people, the issues.
A new and balanced perspective.
CGTN. See the difference.
Russia and Belarus are conducting a huge military exercise, Zapad 2017, Zapad meaning West, scheduled between September 14th and 20th in Belarus and eastern Russia. According to figures announced by Russia's defense ministry, the drills involve some 12,700 troops, some 70 aircraft, 10 combat ships, along with nearly 700 tanks, machine guns or other heavy weapons. The drills are being held amid rising tensions between Russia and NATO over the Ukraine crisis and NATO's military deployment around the Baltic Sea. Though Russia's Ministry of Defense says the purpose of the exercise is purely defensive, it has deeply worried NATO and states sharing borders with Russia. Meanwhile, several NATO countries are joining Sweden in its largest military exercise in 23 years, Aurora 2017. So will the drills escalate current tensions? Joining me for the discussion are Professor Alexander Lukin from Moscow at the National Research University's Higher School of Economics, and in Beijing, Harvey Zoding, Research Fellow with the Center for China and Globalization. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Professor Lukin, the Russian Defense Ministry insists Zapad is purely defensive. Could you explain to us what exactly is the purpose of the drills with many more soldiers involved than previous Zapad games?
Well, I think there's nothing extraordinary about these drills, because we've had them many times before in various regions of the country. So these exercises are joint exercises with Belarus, with which we have a union state. And this is very natural, and of course it's defensive. It's just the only purpose is to keep our troops well prepared for any kind of danger. So if someone wants to be worried, let them be worried. We cannot do anything about it.
Professor, I completely disagree with you, sir, because of the fact, number one, your country says 12,700 troops. That's a fake number. Indeed, 13,000 is the threshold for the Vienna Agreement, by which you have to have observers. You have something to hide, because you're not telling us that by various estimates, then based on the number of support facilities and so on, that there's upwards of 100,000, 200,000, or 300,000 troops who are participating from Russia and Belarus in this exercise. And they're threatening the Baltic states and threatening Poland, that look very much like the hypothetical countries involved in this exercise, sir.
Professor Lukin?
Yes, well, what I'm hearing now is typical propaganda, because all these figures, they are non-existent. People take it from the news, from anti-Russian newspapers. There are official figures that are given, and anyone can verify it now. We have all kinds of things to verify. When my colleague is saying that it's threatening bordering states, say Baltic states, in what way? I mean, if any kind of exercise threatens a bordering state, well, there are American exercises, for example, in South Korea. Does it mean that they threaten China, for example, or North Korea? Or then, if we come, we have to be, we have to use the same standards to everybody. If we don't, then of course, then it becomes propaganda.
Good point, sir, because I think the truth will come after the fact. One American general has said that this exercise is a Trojan horse. What he meant by that is that all this equipment, all these troops are now present in Belarus. We have to see how many of them will remain afterwards, and then we'll know the true answer to this question.
Professor Lukin, how do you look at the suspicion
what's the problem? What is?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
I mean, if Russia, if even Russian troops remain in Belarus, what is it in for you? Why do you care about it? This is our ally, and we decided between ourselves.
It's your ally.
Besides, you mentioned the. Yeah. So what about it? That's why we can station our troops there or not, if they agree, of course.
Yes, of course.
I mean, American
of course
troops
you can station them there.
Dozens of hundreds.
You can station them there, but your country also has a few problems with your ally Belarus, because they've been expressing some independent views lately in terms of flirtation with Europe and the West. Your country doesn't like that. So I'd have to say that in addition to the Baltic states and Poland, Belarus itself may be problematic and may have something to worry about.
Well, I think if they have something to worry about, they wouldn't hold this joint military games together, Javi.
I'm not sure they have the power to say niet.
Well, that's right. Also, my colleague said that something about this imaginary state that we use during the exercise, but it's an absolutely normal practice. The United States, for example, uses such imaginary states all the time during the exercises. And of course, in every drills, this is an absolutely normal practice, so there's nothing to worry about. I mean, if you want to engineer a special thing to worry about, you can do it. But then you have to worry about every exercise in the world.
Well, basically, Mr. Harvey, let me ask you this question, because you were talking about Russia stepping up its military presence or trying to use that as a Trojan horse cart. The NATO has also been expanding, increasing its military presence in Eastern Europe. I'm talking about the United States, for instance. They just bolstered its defense capability by shipping in military equipment last Wednesday into Poland, and they have also been stepping up their troop deployment in Poland since the beginning of this year. And we're not hearing the Western media shouting, fear or fears of aggression over all of that.
It's in reaction, we believe, to increased possibility of Russian aggression. And so I think it's just a balancing act, tit for tat.
Is that, Professor Lukin, is that a response that Russia can accept?
Well, I mean, this is just a joke, of course. Because, I've heard people saying that Russia is threatening American interests by bringing its troops too close to American bases and troops in Europe, for example. What are the American troops doing there in the first place? So we are not supposed to feel threatened about it, but America, which is like many thousand miles away, they feel threatened for some reason. My colleague just said that Belarus should be worried. Well, the government of Belarus is not worried, but he is worried for some reason. Well, this is, of course, ideology and propaganda.
Well, I think, sir, the time will tell. And in answer to your point, the United States did not go into Ukraine and take a big bite out of it under false pretenses.
Well, but this went into
goes
many
back to
other
the Cold
countries,
War, where Russia is
made,
slicing off a piece of the salami at a time, and pretty soon you have the whole salami.
Ukraine was part of Russia many years ago, too.
there was no Russia at that time even. It was not Russia. It was the
But
Soviet
I think the
Union.
problem,
It's a
I think
different country.
really, yeah, I think, Javi, really the problem is when Russia is doing something, you hear this fear, you hear this, you know, threat all over the media. But when the US or the NATO, the Western military alliance is pushing their defense front line towards the east, people are generally quiet. I think that is the fact that I have a problem with.
But I think now with the internet, there are so many news sources that the balance is out there. But yes, the Western media is a very strong media, so you have somewhat of a point, yes.
Mm-hmm. Professor Lukin, how do you think the situation can get better in the end? Is there any way in the future that this kind of mistrust can be watered down a little bit between Russia and NATO, which has been escalating?
I think at the moment it's very difficult to talk to Americans or Western Europeans, especially the so-called new Europe, because there's also a financial aspect of their worries. You know, now President Trump demands them to pay more for their defense, but countries like Poland or Baltic states, they say, you see how big a threat from Russia there is, so we don't have this money. You have to continue paying for us. So it's not only that kind of feeling, but there is also a material aspect to that. And I think that it's difficult. We can cooperate with Americans like in some areas, like we do in Syria, but it's difficult to talk about things like Ukraine or Europe. I think we should just wait and see what happens. Besides, the politics in the United States has now become very hectic, and you don't really know whom to talk about and who takes the decision. So I just think that we should wait and see for some.
That's certainly a point we can agree on.
Yeah, we have to leave it. Good that we agree on something finally. Many thanks, Professor Alexander Lukin, joining us from Moscow, and Javi Zodin here in Beijing. As usual, a quick last point. Given the tension surrounding these military exercises, many have been asking if this could be a prelude to an upcoming war, with Moscow playing the Trojan horse card by stationing troops in Belarus. But consider this, none of Russia's neighbors has got any closer to joining NATO in the past year, and unlike in Georgia and Ukraine, Belarus seems unlikely to want to join NATO either. So there is much less reason for Russia to carry out a surprise annexation of Belarus, quite apart from the fact that such a move would seriously alarm other post-Soviet republics that currently have good relations with Moscow. These days would, after all, probably look for guarantors other than Russia, which would not be in Moscow's best interest. So while some Cold War mentalities are undoubtedly being stoked once again on both sides of the divide, it seems unlikely that things will change greatly as a result of these drills. That's it for this edition of The Point with Millie Sheehan. As always, follow me on Twitter or visit our Facebook page using the handle The Point with LX. Download the application called CGTN Live, or go to YouTube and look for CGTN The Point. Thanks for watching. You've got The Point.